Hello everyone. Welcome to the lecture on Constitutional Framework of Rights and Marginal Communities. This lecture is part of your paper on media and margins. In this lecture, you will be introduced to the processes which are responsible for the marginalization of certain groups and some of the constitutional and other legislative provisions which aim to promote and protect such marginalized groups. Further, the lecture will help you comprehend marginality of groups in India as a process determined by a combination of factors. Finally, it will provide you with insights into the rights available to marginalized groups in India as well as the limitations of existing legislations cover. Let us begin. Marginalized groups refer to communities of people who are at the periphery of a given structure. The structure may be economic, social, political, and ecological, among others. In order to comprehend the process of marginalization, a social arrangement or a structure must be imagined in its totality as a system which has several unequal groups or communities competing for power, privilege, and resources. Groups which have the greatest access to power and resources are to be imagined to be assuming positions at the center of a given structure. Those groups which have least access to power and resources in a given structure occupy positions at its periphery, thereby assuming the status of being the most marginalized. Marginalization as a construct. Due to their marginalized condition, these groups of people suffer manifold deprivations, including access to rights and resources, which adversely impact their lives. Their vulnerability in society is reinforced by the lack of access to power in a given structure, which adds to the overall precariousness of their existence. Such a condition prevents them from achieving parity with the lesser marginalized groups in society. Structures thus contain groups which are unequal and hierarchical. Marginalization is further complicated by the existence of several structures in society to which groups can simultaneously belong to. Some groups may occupy marginalized positions in two or more structures, thereby rendering them extremely vulnerable to discrimination and violence. They are susceptible to violations of the body and of rights, leaving them bereft of a life of basic dignity. Marginalization is not a static condition. Instead, it is a fluid categorization which is determined by multiple factors such as historicity, space, politics, migrations, nationalisms, among others. Communities which may be marginalized at one point in time may not be marginalized at another owing to certain factors such as new legislations, or political struggles. Groups which were dominant at a certain movement may find themselves relegated to the margins at another owing to clauses such as a shift in power alliances, alterations in demographic conditions, or due to events including and not limited to partition, terrorism, migration, refugee crisis, or ecological catastrophes. Marginalization, thus, is a transient categorization of any community. There are possibilities for groups to transit towards or away from the margins of any given structure. Often such possibilities are thwarted by those in power or at times even the state, as they apply all resources at their command to ensure that existing hierarchies are not disturbed. When seeking to comprehend marginalization, it is pertinent to understand that most groups are not homogeneous or monolithic in nature. Although the group members may bear a certain identity which renders them united in being considered as marginalized, yet the level of marginalization sensed by the members is also overdetermined by the other identities held by those constituting that group. For instance, all Dalits have been historically marginalized, yet a wealthy male Dalit's marginalization can hardly be equated with that of a Dalit woman who is poor. Historicity helps shed light on the marginalization of a given community. Marginalization of groups is often constructed by society through the ages with the aid of norms, laws, folklores, customs, religions, and sciences. For instance, the position of marginalized groups such as women tribals, sex workers, homosexuals, refugees, migrants, religious and linguistic minorities, or Dalits cannot be understood if the history of the way in which those groups have been constructed is not taken into consideration. An entire gamut of customs, practices, sciences, ethnographies, myths, maps, museums, censuses, among other conceptual apparatus, have been utilized throughout history to situate certain groups at the margins by producing them to be less competent, less able, and at times even less human. Space is yet another framework which enables the understanding of the creation of marginalization of communities. Groups which occupy positions at spatial distances from political power or which are relegated to the peripheries due to the creation of new states suffer marginalization by way of being distant from the center. Groups which are far removed from accepted societal behavior, say heteronormativity, suffer marginalization as they pose a challenge to standards which have been historically constructed as decent, moral, and dignified. At times, a binary or a duality is created which privileges one identity over the other, thereby helping in maintaining the superiority of one group over the other. For instance, men, woman, upper caste, lower caste, white, black, heterosexual, homosexual are categories which render one identity among the binary as weaker, inferior, and as the degraded and or deformed other constitutional framework of rights in India and marginalized groups. States all over the world have attempted to provide rights in sections of people which are considered marginalized. Rights provided to such groups have made possible some piecemeal solutions to the vulnerability, domination, and subjugation faced by marginalized groups. Mere guarantees, however, provided by legislations in the form of constitutional writs often fall short of emancipating such categories of people given the inequalities and injustices inherent in the politico-socio-economic systems of India. Radical and systemic changes are thus required for marginalized groups to live a life of dignity, allowing them to transcend untold miseries, generational subjugation, and manifold hardships. The Indian Constitution and a gamut of other legislations have attempted to provide protection to some of the marginalized groups in the country. This lecture will take into consideration some constitutional rights for certain marginalized groups in India. In determining the marginality of the groups, the distance of the group from the dominant and powerful other, its lack of representation, recognition, and power, and other historical and socio-economic determinations have been taken as the main reference points. One of the groups considered marginalized in India is that of the Dalits, who have been victims of the caste system which divides people based on birth into a hierarchical order determined by the kind of work they carry out. The caste system forecloses the possibility of social mobility of the groups, thereby freezing groups into relations of domination and subordination across generations. Those belonging to the lower caste are deemed to be outside the caste system altogether have faced the burden of untouchability due to the binary of purity pollution imposed on the groups in the caste system based on the kind of work allotted to the different categories. Dalits carried out menial work which was considered impure by the more dominant castes, which led to the marginalization of the former in the hierarchy that pervades most of Indian society. Discrimination against Dalits due to the work allotted to them in the caste system prevented them from accessing education and resources, which amplified the marginalization of this category of people from socio-economic as well as political power. The Constitution of India lists Dalit groups as scheduled castes, that is SCs, and provides a litany of provisions towards ensuring their social, economic, and political progress. In a bid to ensure the end of the pervasive practice of systemic discrimination, Article 17 of the Indian Constitution abolishes the heinous practice of untouchability in India, which was one of the darkest practices of the caste system, of which the lower castes were heavily discriminated and prevented from living a life of dignity. In addition, the Untouchability Offences Act in 1955 was implemented to make the practice of untouchability punishable. This act was reformulated as the 1955 Protection of Civil Rights Act. Another important measure in this regard was the 1989 Scheduled Castes, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act, which aimed to protect the rights of these marginalized groups. The Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Rules 1995 were framed to prevent atrocities on these groups. The National Commission for Backward Classes Act 1993 and the National Commission for Safai Karmacharis Act 1993 were other legislations which sought to alleviate the marginalization of Dalits. One of the foremost ways in which Dalits are sought to be rescued from their perpetual marginalization is by way of reservations in political posts and educational institutes. Article 16, subsection 4 of the Constitution allows for reservation for backward class of citizens, including scheduled castes who are not sufficiently represented in the state. Article 330 reserves seats for scheduled castes in the Lok Sabha, and under Article 332(1), seats are reserved for them in the assemblies at the state level. Articles 243 reserves seats for scheduled castes in the panchayat and municipality levels. B.R. Ambedkar was instrumental in ensuring positive discrimination for Dalits in the Constitution of India in this manner to overcome societal, economic, and political backwardness. Seats are reserved for Dalits in educational institutions under Article 15, as it is deemed that education which had been denied to them for centuries will allow them to achieve social mobility by way of securing jobs which have otherwise been a closely guarded bastion of upper castes. Article 335 mandates the relaxation in qualifying marks for scheduled castes with regard to admission in institutes of education or service-related promotions. Reservations in political positions and state services also facilitate Dalits with access to power, which enables them to partake in decision making and agenda setting which were otherwise foreclosed to them. Another group which has been marginalized in India are those which have been categorized as scheduled tribes. The words tribal, tribes, tribal groups are being used here purely as administrative categories and not as cultural classifications. India has several tribal groups which are found in a number of states. They make up close to 8% of the total Indian population. They are largely found in northeast and central India as well as other parts of the country. Hilly and forested areas have been historic habitats of some of the tribes which impact their marginalization due to the remoteness of these terrains. Some of the tribes are located in mineral-rich regions which adversely impacts them given the interest of the capitalistic state in acquiring such resources. Land acquisition, laying of transportation lines, demarcation of forest rights are but some of the ways in which the historic ways of life of tribal communities have been impacted by the state in colonial and post-colonial times, leading to their marginalization in terms of access to socio-economic freedoms. Bereft of traditional ways of life and livelihood and untrained in formal education, tribal communities often are unable to claim the opportunities offered by a state gripped of the trappings of modernity. There have been competing arguments relating to the policies to be followed by the state with regard to tribal groups. While some favor complete assimilation with non-tribal groups, others are favorably disposed to non-interference in their ways of life. A middle path which reconciles development with tribal ways of life has guided the state's interventions pertaining to this group of people. The Constitution of India lays provisions for promoting the welfare of tribal groups. The Constitution of India lists tribal groups as scheduled tribes and mandates a host of policies aimed at protecting their culture as well as ensuring improvements in their life. Article 19, Section 5 provides the state with the power to prevent non-tribal citizens from movement and taking up permanent residence in areas inhabited by tribal communities. Such an act helps these groups maintain their links and relationships with the land, thereby eschewing alienation. Educational and economic interests of tribal groups, scheduled castes, and other weaker groups are to be promoted by the state according to Article 46. Article 16 of the Indian Constitution mandates reservation for those listed as scheduled tribes in public services. According to Article 330 and 332, scheduled tribes are provided with reservation at the legislative assemblies in the center and the state levels. Article 243 reserves seats for scheduled tribes in the panchayat and municipality levels. Relaxation of marks for entry into educational institutes or promotion is provided under Article 335 for scheduled tribes. A national commission for scheduled tribes was set up according to provisions provided under Article 338. Article 339, Section 2 empowers the Union Government to direct to states to implement schemes deemed essential for the welfare of tribal groups. The Union Government can provide granting aids to state governments for welfare schemes for tribal groups under Article 275, Section 1. Article 244 of the Indian Constitution lays down guidelines concerning the governance of the areas designated as scheduled and tribal. The fifth schedule of the Constitution lays out guidelines with regard to the governance of all areas designated as scheduled and tribal, save Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram. The sixth schedule lays down guidelines with regard to administration and control of the areas deemed as scheduled tribe areas within Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram. Tribal welfare in the states of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Orissa are addressed under Article 164. A range of policies and programs for tribal development and welfare have sprung from these elaborate constitutional provisions for these groups. Yet, another marginalized group throughout the world is that of women. Patriarchy is one important lens through which the marginalization of women in public as well as private affairs may be understood. Scientific, religious, as well as cultural conceptions have been used to reinforce the supposed physical and intellectual weakness of women, rendering them incapable of being at parity with men in societal, economic, as well as political fields. Wars, nationalisms, patriotisms, and colonialisms play a role in reinforcing women as cultural metaphors for the state and or identity in question, which further add to the precariousness of women's lives as they are then seen to be symbols to be targeted and controlled. Control of bodies of women has been rampant throughout history and is embodied in restrictions placed on their movements, dress, education, among other limitations, which in turn prevent them from constituting their lives in an independent way. Women often are the bearers of multiple burdens depending on the positions which they are situated in the several coexisting structures of class, caste, religion, nation, etc. For instance, a woman who is poor, handicapped, and belongs to a lower caste and to a linguistic or and religious or and sexual minority is at a far greater disadvantage than a woman who does not belong to these categories. Thus, women are not a homogeneous community. Throughout history, there have been movements for the rights of women. Some of the movements have resulted in successes for women's access to rights in the public as well as the private sphere. However, despite legislations, there continues to be violations of the rights of women in the world today. These violations manifest in the forms of discrimination, subjugation, as well as domination of women and prevention of their access to education, political power, economic opportunities, and social activities. The issues impacting women are often given less importance by the state, and several dominant narratives and policies on issues such as security, education, and accessibility are gendered in a ways prejudiced against women, and instead reinforce the male-female binary, with female being continuously created as the deformed and devalued other. Advertisements, imagined and constructed conceptions of motherhood, as well as womanhood, false celebration of feminine values in daily rituals, schools, family as desired characteristics for women adds to the continued reproduction of women as the weaker sex, leading girls to accept and perform the distinction between them and men thereby, perpetuating the hierarchies based on constructed ideas of gender and sex. There have been attempts to alleviate the issues plaguing women in society. Socio-religious reformers during the colonial period strived to end heinous practices such as sati and child marriages. They also stressed the importance of widow remarriage and education for women. Post-independence, there were attempts to improve the condition of women in the form of constitutional provisions. Several activists and non-governmental organizations have been involved in improving the condition of women as well as preventing atrocities such as dowry demands and witch hunting, which continue to be prevalent in society today. The Constitution enunciates the right to equality and prevention of discrimination based on sex, both of which provide safeguards for women. Under Article 15, Section 3, the state may take action to promote the welfare of women and children. The directive principles of state policy elaborates on measures which relate to equal pay for equal work for both men and women, maternity benefits, health and moral well-being of the mother and also the child. A host of legislations with regard to prohibition of dowry, child marriage, equal remuneration, indecent representation of women have been undertaken by the state to complement the existing provisions in the Constitution, which aim to ensure the safety of women. In a bid to improve access of women to political power and decision making, 33% seats are also reserved for women in elected bodies across the legislative spectrum of local governance, panchayat, block and municipality. Whether such constitutional provisions and additional legislations have been adequate in transforming hierarchical and inherently discriminatory structures and institutions is questionable, as heinous crimes against women as well as discrimination against women continues unabated in contemporary society. Nonetheless, a string of measures for women and girl children have been implemented in the realms of socio-economic welfare in a bid to promote the interests of these groups. The government has also attempted to empower women by way of social and economic benefits as well as through the system of gender budgeting. Over time, the government has become more sensitive to gender relativity, which bodes well for women. In 1992, the National Commission for Women was constituted to render services to uplift and promote rights of women. Its mandate includes a wide gamut of issues pertaining to economic, legal, social, educational, domestic, and political spheres. The Commission is responsible for ensuring the empowerment of women by way of ascertaining vocational training, technology transfer, representation in decision-making bodies, justice, gender sensitization, tackling female infanticide, trafficking, issues of minority women, widows, and victims of violence. One of the most significant legislations has been the 1997 Visakha Guidelines, which were superseded by Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Preventing Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013, which puts the onus on the employers or other persons who are in responsible posts in the workplace to ensure the prevention of sexual harassment in workplaces and provide for the resolution, settlement, and prosecution if sexual harassment is committed. Other legislations enacted by the Indian Parliament to promote the empowerment of women include the 1956 Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, the Maternity Benefit Act of 1961, the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 1971, the Equal Remuneration Act of 1976, the 1987 Commission of Sati Prevention Act, the 1994 Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Regulation and Prevention of Misuse Act, and the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act of 2006. The 2001 National Policy for Empowerment of Women aims to empower women by way of specific policies, including the promotion of equality of the sexes, enhancement of equality of access in socio-economic life, bolstering of laws protecting women, and challenging adverse cultural practices, among others. India's religious and linguistic minorities also face marginalization in the socio-economic and political spheres. In India, religious minorities comprise those groups which are non-Hindu, and linguistic minorities are determined by their numerical strength in the state in question. For instance, in Assam, Hindi-speaking groups will be a minority, whereas in Uttar Pradesh, Hindi speakers will comprise the dominant group. Such groups often face discrimination due to their numerically weaker position, making the right to equality most important to them. They possibly could also face problems in practicing their religion or expressing and protecting their linguistic heritage. They may also be victims of communal violence incited by vested interests. Economic, educational, as well as political factors often co-determine the treatment meted out to such minorities. The report tabled by the Sachar Committee in 2006 highlighted the miserable socio-economic conditions of the Muslims in India. Most tellingly, Indian Muslims were positioned below scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in terms of backwardness, and it underlined the absence of Muslims in the administrative services and the police. There are several articles in the Indian Constitution which ensures such equality. For instance, Article 14 of the Indian Constitution mandates equality before law for all. Such minorities are also protected by Article 15, which ensures that citizens will not be discriminated by the state on the grounds on either or any of the following: religion, race, caste, gender, and birthplace. Equality of opportunity to all citizens with regard to employment in public service is mandated under Article 16. Minorities have been given freedoms under Articles 19 to 22, which ensure freedom of speech and expression, assembly, association, movement, residence, trade, and occupation. Religious minorities have been given safeguards under Article 25, which allows them freedom of conscience and freedom to protest, profess, practice, and propagate religion. Religious minorities have been given safeguards under Article 25, which allows them freedom of conscience and freedom to profess, practice, and propagate religion. Citizens are provided with the right to manage the religious affairs and institutions under Article 26. Article 27 exempts payment of taxes with regard to expenditure incurred while maintaining or promoting any particular religion. Freedom with regard to attendance in certain educational institutions during religion's instruction is mandated under Article 28. Rights pertaining to culture and education are bestowed on linguistic minorities under Articles 29 and 30. The right of minorities to conserve languages or scripts is available under Article 29. The right of religion as well as linguistic minorities to set up educational institutions has been enshrined in Article 30. Article 30, Section 2 prevents the state from discriminating with regard to granting aid against any educational institution under the control of any linguistic or religious minority group. When comprehending marginalization in India, it is pertinent to consider several other groups, including informal workers, among others, who are marginalized in more ways than one. India's labor force has two categories: formal, organized, and informal, unorganized. Government administration and registered public and private companies can be alluded to as the formal sector. The unorganized sector is comprised of those involved in activities such as fishing, farming, daily wage workers, domestic helps, migrant workers, and small self-employed workers, among others. More than 90% of India is working in the unorganized economy. They receive appallingly miserable wages with little or no health, education, or any other social benefits. Working conditions have increasingly worsened due to forces of capitalism, which tend to exploit laborers and appropriate surplus labor. The plight of farmers, an occupation of more than 50% of Indians in the country in the contemporary times, is evident of the hardships faced by those in the informal sector. The state and civil society have been unable to meaningfully intervene in the informal sector with regard to providing those involved in it with social, economic, and security benefits. There have been efforts in implementing certain policies for the benefit of such works, such as an emphasis on skill development, acts including and not limited to the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act MGNREGA of 2005, the 2009 Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education, that is RTE Act, a stress on microfinance among others. The Indian Constitution mentions several labor laws on issues pertaining to wages, work hours, work conditions, benefits, dismissal, safety provisions, formation of trade unions and collective bargaining, disciplinary action, industrial disputes, etc. However, these provisions apply mainly to the formal sector of the labor force, thereby rendering those involved in the informal sector invisible to the state, allowing the latter to eschew responsibility for their welfare and protection. To conclude, let us now sum up what we have learnt in this lecture. In this lecture, you have learnt that marginalization is a fluid and shifting category which is overdetermined by various economic, political, social, legal, and political processes. It has also been emphasized during the lecture that marginalization of groups is a condition constructed through history and is fostered by culture, religion, and sciences, among others. It has also been stressed that it is not necessary that numerically weaker groups is a mandatory characteristic for a group to be marginalized. Other factors like historic oppression, patriarchy, capitalism, and state are instrumental in the creation of marginalization of a community. It has also been enunciated above that there are manifold communities in India which are marginalized politically or economically or socially. Some members of marginalized groups may be reeling under more than one kind of marginality. The Indian Constitution, as well as other legislations and policies, provide some provisions for the welfare and protection of some of these groups. In this lecture, marginality of Dalits, Adivasis, women, and informal workers have been discussed in brief. It is important to remember that apart from these groups, there are several other groups which face marginalization and its implications. Atrocities, discrimination, and violation of rights of those belonging to these marginalized communities continue in the contemporary times, which indicate that greater interventions are needed to protect and promote these groups, and it also points to the need to dismantle structures which are essentially hierarchical, patriarchal, and discriminatory. It also needs to be borne in mind that being in the periphery of such structures, which are almost always based on frameworks such as patriarchy and capitalism, among others, may be emancipating in a very different sense, as the distance from the core allows these marginalized groups certain freedoms in their ways of life which may not be available to those closer to the center of such groups, as they are required to perform in certain ways considered important by these frameworks, which may be morally and physically curbing rather than liberating, coercive rather than empowering, and suffocating rather than unshackling. You are advised to read the module carefully. For further study, do go through the extended reading list provided with the lecture and attempt all the questions given with the e-text. Thank you.